In the fall of 2007, MTG players finally saw for the very first time Planeswalkers as playable characters. The Lorwyn 5 were introduced in, as you may have guessed it, Lorwyn block, with each one representing one of Magic's 5 colors. Many Magic the Gathering players were skeptical of the potential power levels of these new card types and what it could mean for the future of the game. Well, since then, over 200 Planeswalker cards have been printed, and their power levels have only increased, with a few exceptions of course. They've also remained unique in that to this day, they're the only card types that can produce an emblem. And to this day, there have been no cards printed by Wizards of the Coast that can remove or interact with an emblem in any way. In this deck tech, I am going to show you how to use and abuse these Planeswalker abilities to the fullest effect. First thing you may be wondering is why Pir and Toothy? Isn't Atraxa the premier Superfriends commander? I mean, why not? She has more colors that would give us access to more Planeswalkers, she's a better blocker with her keyword ability Soup, and her 4 power 4 toughness body. And she proliferates each Planeswalker every turn, so why shouldn't we run her? It seems silly not to. The reason we're not running Atraxa is because Pir is better in nearly every way. Unlike Atraxa, Pir can be consistently played on turn 2 with the help of our low cost and no cost ramp spells. Reason number 2, Pir and Toothy do not attract nearly as much hate as Atraxa. Reason number 3, although Pir is the star of the show, Toothy actually gives us a plan B and an alternate win con that we'll get more into later. And reason number 4, our Planeswalkers can ultimate much faster with Pir, so why don't we take a look at it? For 2 and a green, you get a 1/1 legendary human with, if one or more counters would be put on a permanent your team controls, that many plus 1 of each of those kinds of counters are put on that permanent instead. So if we have one of our Planeswalkers enter the battlefield while we control Pir, that Planeswalker will enter the battlefield with an additional loyalty counter. Not only that, when we uptick that Planeswalker, we're also adding an additional counter then too. What this means for us is that depending what kind of Planeswalkers we choose to put in our deck, we could have them ultimate as soon as 1 turn after we've played them. When picking which Planeswalkers we want to include in our deck, we have to keep just a few basic guidelines in mind. We want each Planeswalker to cost no more than 5 mana, with the exception of Ugin, just because he's too strong not to run. And most importantly, we need our Planeswalkers to be able to ult after just 1 turn of having them out with Pir. Besides that, it is entirely up to you to decide which Planeswalkers you would like to put in your deck and which emblems you would have the most fun playing with. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention some of the best walkers you could possibly put in your deck. For example, Kiora the Crashing Wave is everything and more that you could ever want out of a Planeswalker for this deck. She only costs 4 mana, so you can play her on turn 3 after your turn 2 Pir, assuming you kept an opening hand with some ramp. You can use her +1 ability to fog whatever creature you can't block with either Pir or your mana dorks. And then on turn 4, you get an emblem that gives you 9/9 Krakens every turn for the rest of the game. If for whatever reason you can't beat your opponents to death with an unsurmountable tide of Krakens, at the very least, you're gonna have a never-ending wall of blockers for your other Planeswalkers. Speaking of which, Core Set 2021 gave us an incredibly powerful Planeswalker in Teferi, Master of Time. Normally, he's really good on his own, but with Pir, he's able to increase his loyalty by 2 on each player's turn. So assuming you play him in a 4-player game, you'll be able to use his ultimate ability before it ever even comes back to your turn. And last but not least, the Planeswalker you should always include in this deck, no matter what, is Jace the Living Guild Pack. This is because Jace's ultimate is effectively just a Leovold Wheel of Fortune combo. This combo is so good that it got Leovold banned in Commander. It's because whenever you can force an opponent to lose their hands while refilling your own hand, you're all but guaranteeing yourself a win by burying your opponents in card advantage. And to supplement our Planeswalkers, we're also going to be running the 3 cards that no Superfriends deck would be complete without. Those are Doubling Season, Deep Glow Skate, and the new Vorincleave Vorinclex from Kaldheim. I consider these 3 auto-includes because they either double the amount of loyalty counters a planeswalker enters the battlefield with, or in the case of Deep Glow Skate, they will double the counters of any and all planeswalkers you currently have on the battlefield. Now, every Magic player loves it when a plan comes together, but sometimes, despite our best efforts, things don't always go exactly as planned. Maybe our stuff is getting targeted too much by removal, or someone had an explosive opening hand, and even though we kept a good opening hand, we just can't keep up with them. A lot of things can go wrong, and that's just the natural way of the game. So it's good to have a plan B for when things go awry. Luckily for us, our plan B lives in our command zone. Toothy, Imaginary Friend, doesn't just give our deck its blue color identity, he also gives us an alternate win con for when our usual avenues to victory are obstructed. For 3 generic mana and a blue, Toothy Imaginary Friend is a legendary 1/1 illusion with, whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Toothy Imaginary Friend. When Toothy leaves the battlefield, draw a card for each +1/+1 counter on it. So we can actually use Toothy's ability with Deadeye Navigator to draw our deck and win with Jace, Wielder of Mysteries. Let's take a closer look at the combo to see how it actually works. We begin with Toothy already on the battlefield, and we assume he already has at least one +1/+1 counter on him. We cast Tooth and Nail Entwined to get Deadeye Navigator and Vorinclex Monstrous Raider. When Deadeye Navigator enters the battlefield, we soulbind it to Toothy and use its ability to flicker Toothy. This will put a Toothy triggered ability on the stack, and Toothy will already be back onto the battlefield by the time it resolves, and we will put a number of +1/+1 counters onto Toothy equal to double the amount of cards we drew thanks to Vorinclex. Every time you flicker Toothy, you will draw cards equal to double the amount of cards you drew already from the last time you flickered him. Do this enough times, and you'll draw into Jace, Wielder of Mysteries. Play Jace, flicker Toothy one more time to draw over 60 cards and win the game with Jace's static ability. As you may have noticed, this combo is very mana intensive, so for best results, you may not want to go all in on this strategy unless you have the mana for it. I hope you found this deck tech helpful. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas, be sure to check out our Discord, where you can interact with the makers of Mox Cardboard TV directly. You can ask for deck building advice, let us know what sort of content you'd like to see in future videos, and you also get a sneak peek at our future content before anyone else. So as always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.